This is Dave Meltzer with Entrepreneurs of Playbook, and I have James Altucher, an American hedge fund manager, author, podcaster, and entrepreneur. All around good guy, though. Him and I share a great perspective. Welcome to the Playbook.
David, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be on here. By the way, I just want to say I'm a big fan of your book, Game Time Decision Making. Love the podcast. Love everything you're doing.
You could tell he's a hedge fund manager because he obviously takes bribes, because obviously nobody's going to say that right off the bat on the Playbook. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. But I really want to get into more of the attitudinal things. You know, you and I have shared this eclectic background combined with lessons and stories and failures. But I think there's some core principles I'd like to explore. And the first is, I thought it really unique that someone in your position was so heavily entrenched in gratitude. And so one of my favorite topics, I love to kind of bring it up, of how important, number one, gratitude is to you, and what and how do you utilize it in the pragmatic business world?
Yeah, it's very interesting because just scientifically, the way the brain works, you can't really multitask. Like, people think they can multitask, but you can't really have two thoughts in the brain at the exact same nanosecond. So if you're feeling grateful, it's hard to feel the things that I almost got too used to feeling, which was anxiety or regret over past failures, or anxiety, is this going to happen again, or what's going on in the world. But if you're grateful for what's happening now, then, so many things happen in the body. For one thing, and this is going to sound a little geeky, but the neurochemical serotonin is released, and that makes you feel more satisfied with where you are, and it kind of trains your mind and body to be content and satisfied and experience well-being. But also, I think a lot of people almost, I don't want to say they misunderstand gratitude. Like, people understand the importance of it, but it's very easy for me to say every day, oh, I'm grateful for my kids, or I'm grateful I'm alive. But those are hard to really understand, because I've always been alive. I've never not been alive. So it's just easy to say, well, at least I'm alive, or at least I'm not in a hospital, or whatever. Those are easy. And I think the real challenging moments are in the small day-to-day, when you feel that little flare up of anxiety or regret or whatever. Let's just even say you're driving into the city and there's so much traffic, you're going to be late for a very important meeting. We've all been there, and we're all like, oh my God. And you're like fidgeting in the car, and you don't know what to do, and you're upset. Like, this always happens to me. And I always try to say, okay, I'm going to pull back for a second. This is a perfect opportunity for what I call a difficult gratitude problem. So perhaps, and then you have to think about it. It's like a puzzle. Perhaps I am so lucky because I'm living near such an important and busy city that there's all these opportunities, and one of these opportunities is a meeting I'm going to. So I'm very grateful to be in such a busy city where there's this amount of traffic. That's why there's this amount of traffic, is because I'm lucky to be living here, and and so on. For every micro or macro problem, there's nuances. There's ways to kind of do the Rubik's Cube of unlocking the hidden gratitude there.
What's so interesting too is you're the only other person I know. I talk about that one thing on the front of my mind. I talk about, because people in my world are like, you're an extraordinary multitasker. I said, no, what I am is I've worked my muscle to move from one thing to another. But then because of that, I've also had to work another muscle, which is to stay on one topic. And so the ability that I created to be able to move from one thing to another, back to the other, that looks like multitasking, it also caused some interference in my life, because I also found it very easy to move off of topic. And sometimes the topic that I moved off of was not the most important or aligned with my values. Have you used any pragmatic mechanism for focus? Because usually people that do and have raised their awareness to the one multitude of moving back and forth also have had pragmatic tools to stay focused.
No, and I don't have a pragmatic tool, and I'm able to say that relatively quickly because obviously I've thought about this a lot. And for instance, let's just take a basic to-do list. I don't like to have a to-do list because then I'm going to feel, then it gamifies what I'm trying to accomplish for the day. And then if I don't, also, whenever I've made such a list, it's so big. There's no way I'm going to finish it. So I like to, at any given moment, I'm only going to do the most important thing I should be doing at that moment. And if I can't remember what the most important thing is for that moment, chances are whatever I'm not remembering wasn't that important. So if like it's really important for me to call my kids, I'll call my kids. If it's really important for me to be on this podcast, I'll be on this podcast. Or if I need to work on a book because a book has a hard deadline, I'm going to use the bulk of my free time working on that book. Will I miss on? I'm almost infamous among my colleagues for not always returning phone calls, not always returning emails, because I do forget stuff. And if I put all these things on my to-do list, I'd be, oh, now I gotta return that email. I gotta return that call. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. Oh, I gotta, just call this guy for 3 minutes. And you, David, it's never 3 minutes. It's an hour and a half. And so I only at any given point focus on, and by the way, then I think at the end of the day or at the end of the week, oh God, there's all these people I didn't return their phone calls. You know what? I am never going to call them again, probably. So it just is what it is. You only have one life.
Which makes it a great honor that you're here, right? We got him to call us back, follow up.
Oh, no, I was very excited to come on.
That's awesome. Now, it's so interesting to share everyone's perspective about, list and importance, but several different times already you've mentioned the importance of your family. And I love, to look a little deeper into people's minds is the, analogies that they use or the examples that they use when they intertwine, especially someone with your background, your family, where and how, because I won't preempt it, but where and how do you balance, all the different things that you do get done? I know we don't call everybody back or email everyone back, but you are a very productive and accessible person. How do you balance in what's obviously something super important to you, which is your family?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I don't know if I've always been able to do that. So maybe that's why it's risen in importance for me so much. Like I remember one time when I've gone broke, unfortunately, several times. I've made money, gone broke, made money, gone broke.
That's why we're friends.
Yeah. And I remember one time I was so depressed and anxious and I was losing a home and everything. And people would tell me, this is when my oldest daughter was just like 2 years old or 3 years old. And people would tell me, oh, just play with your daughter and you'll feel better. It didn't really make me feel better. Like I would play with her and all I would think is like, man, I not only did I ruin my life, I probably ruined her life. And
I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So I've always but I always thought about them. I always made sure I was there for them. They know I'm there for them at any point that they need me. And, I try to spend all the time I can with them. But on any given moment, and, it's an interesting thing. Your heart makes decisions for you, but also your brain makes decisions for you. So you could say, oh, I need to, make money doing X, Y, Z. And you're doing it and you're not really happy doing it. Like something feels off. Or you could do something that you love, but it's not making any money. And so it's really the best when your heart and brain are sort of, and I don't want this to sound wooey because it really isn't. This is really how it feels. It's really great when your heart and brain are almost communicating with each other and they both agree this is something we should do. And you're not rationalizing with the brain and you're not feeling crappy with the heart. And so sometimes you do things that don't make money, but you love it. And but it's really the best when you're able to combine interests and monetize what you love. Like you with sports, obviously you were an athlete since you were a kid. Now you're like, the mastermind of the entire sports industry. You're the secret behind the secret. And, for me at any given point, I mean, there was a 3 or 4 or 5 year period where what I loved doing the most was stand-up comedy. So I would do up to 10 shows a week at clubs, not all, first all around New York City, but then all around the country and then all around the world. And I was obsessed, and that's what I love doing. It makes $0. So there was like this several year period where I had to figure out how am I gonna, keep it going. But, and, I always want to make sure everybody's good. And, it feels good to make money too. You don't want to not make money, but, I had to, that was comedy, stand-up comedy was a thing that I loved the most. And just sometimes you love things and focus on those. And then sometimes hopefully interests change. And the whole idea is people think they only have to do one thing in life and focus on that, but you're going to change your interests many times. And the one thing that's consistent though in that is your family, your kids, your friends, your community, your colleagues, your scene. And these are the people who it makes my heart and brain feel good when I reach out to them and just keep watering that garden, so to speak.
That's awesome, man. Now I know what it feels like to interview me, because there's so much good stuff to unpack there. And hopefully we'll do a podcast swap and I can return the favor so you can unpack me. All right. Quick things real quick. I love the idea of the mind and the heart being aligned. One of the things that I've learned recently is the stomach as well. And then I found out recently, like probiotics, the actual physical side of the stomach aligned with your heart and your brain health are actually aligned as well. But even moreover, listening to that journey of, especially, being an on the road comedian, how did you deal with what other people thought? Because, you're an Ivy Leaguer, you probably came from the same type of familiar pressure that I did, kind of the doctor, lawyer, failure pressure, or something along those lines. You seem to have a really great grasp on, I'm going to follow my heart and my mind. I don't care if people laugh at me, scoff at me, or make fun of me. Eventually they'll applaud me. How did you deal with kind of voting for what you wanted in your life?
If you think about it, every decision is either a fear decision or a growth decision. So should I take a job as a lawyer because that's what my parents want me to do? And if I don't do it, I just wasted law school, and how am I going to pay back my student loan debt? That's a fear decision. If you say, oh my gosh, I love defending the Constitution and I love working on mergers and acquisitions, love it, then that's a growth decision. And it's the same thing. So I'll give you an example from the comedy world. Sometimes a world famous comedian will be in the lineup and you'll be in the lineup. And so people will say, hey, do you want to go up before Tracy Morgan or Bill Burr or Chris Rock or whoever? Or do you want to go up right after Chris Rock? And, everybody, 99.999% will say, oh, before. I do not want to go. I do not want to follow Chris Rock. Like, he's going to lock up the audience. They're going to not care about who is this guy. I just saw Chris Rock. Give me Jerry Seinfeld now. Like, who is this guy? And so 100% of the time I'm going to say after, because I'll realize the only reason I would say before is a fear decision, whereas going up after is so clearly a growth decision. Like, if I give myself the challenge of trying to make the audience laugh after TJ Miller or Bill Burr or Tracy Morgan got them to laugh, I'm going to improve. I'm going to get better. Even if everyone hates me, I'm going to get better. And so a lot of the times when you think people are not liking you, what really is happening is you're building this muscle of doing something you love, even though everyone else around you is kind of negative to what you're doing. And another classic example is particularly if you switch interests or you switch careers, or when you open up a new arm of your firm, to represent a different category of people are going to say, you can't do that. Like, why don't you just stick to sports, David? Like, you can't handle this and you don't know anything about it. What are you going to do? And I always realize that's another situation where, someone just said can't to me. That means I have to now do it, because the wall between you and success is all the people saying you can't do this. And so you have to get on the other side of that wall. And that sounds almost too cliche-ish a little bit, but it's really true, right? Like, I'm asking you, actually.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And one of the interesting things about that can't do is that if everyone only voted for what other people wanted, we'd have no extraordinary people.
That is fascinating. Yes.
Right. And so to me, it started, people say, what's, the most influential thing in my life? It was that, as a mediocre athlete who grew up in a hyper academic Jewish family with an educator as a mom, that I actually had the nerve. This is where my success started, to want to play college football. Right. To even have the desire to do that with all the walls of like literally so many no's. And once I broke through that, probably like you with comedy, once you break through, and even if you're not that good, which I am at best an average Division III football player, so I'm not that good of an athlete. But for me, the meaning of that habit of, getting into things I was good at, through law school and being able to make a decision to be an entrepreneur, selling legal research in 92. And, even with comp plans, being able to say, that's nothing. I'm going to do this. That is really the realm in which I teach people to live in this world of abundance. But if you're going to live there, as we get to the last topic, if you're going to live there, you're going to fail. Right. I love failures. I love people who make mistakes, because that means they're in the learning zone. They're not in some comfort zone. They're extraordinary people fail extraordinarily. Right. They lose their houses because they have a desire to must be what they can be. What is the greatest lesson that you've learned in that expansive attitude, in that learning zone, the ability to stand up and say, you know what? I went for it and I lost it all. I've sat there with my 3 daughters and said, this is not making me feel good because they don't have a backyard to play in. My wife's pregnant with my 4th, and I'm in a rented house with rented furniture and 1 car. And I used to live in a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe and fly private. I screwed this up. But what lesson did you learn sitting there in those types of situations?
I guess there's 2 answers. One is, on a very basic level, I realized, I kind of succeeded with, I built businesses and then I would lose everything, build again, sell again, lose it. It was enough times that it was almost like statistically significant. So I was able to ask, like, what am I doing right on the way up and what am I doing wrong on the way down? And so the first level is I was taking care of myself on the way up, but not taking care of myself on the way down. And you could just fill in the blanks, but there's like physical health, emotional health, creative health, and some degree of spiritual health. Physical health is just, are you healthy? Emotional health, are you around people who love you and you love? Creative health is making sure you exercise your creativity muscle every day. Spiritual health is this idea of, solving difficult gratitude problems, not trying to control the things you can't control. And then the next layer is, and this is related to decision making too, I've got to get a handle on how I'm making decisions and what kind of risks I'm taking. Like, risk is a very important part of investing, and not just investing money, but investing time and emotions and so on. And so I had so many different things I was getting interested in and excited about. I had to also learn, well, what am I going to invest my time in? Should I do what I've been doing for 15 years, or should I start a new direction? That's a risk also. So I was grappling with this particular question. And I realized, I had just read, I think, Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers and about the 10,000 hour rule. And I'm like, I don't want to spend 10,000 hours getting good at something new. That's a long time. Like, how am I going to make money during those 10,000 hours? So I kind of modified it a little bit. And this is where risk comes in. I started calling it the 10,000 experiment rule. So let's say I'm interested in, I don't know, let's say I want to make a new fashion line. Something I've never done before, right? So I'm just riffing on this. I have no idea how to make a fashion line, but I would, figure out what's interesting about my fashion line. Maybe I would draw it or have someone draw it. I'd make a little Facebook ad, and I'd put a $20 budget on a Facebook ad and have a picture of somebody wearing my particular idea for a fashion, like maybe a pair of pajamas or whatever. And if it got a 3% click-through rate, doesn't have to go anywhere. I could just see in the analytics what kind of click-through rate is. I just did a little experiment. Are 3% of the population interested in this product? That's a good enough conversion rate, a click-through rate, to say, okay, I'll do the next experiment now. I only risked $20 and maybe a half hour of my time. That was an experiment. And so experiments have very little downside and in money or time, and enormous upside. And the worst case, if an experiment fails, is you learn something. So if nobody clicked through, okay, that didn't work. But I also learned that my idea of using Facebook to validate an idea might be an interesting one. And then I'll do the next experiment and the next experiment and the next experiment. I'll keep doing that until I've gotten better, until I've bypassed the 10,000 hour rules. And now I'm in some new area by the definition of experimenting. No one's gone here. No one's made this light bulb before. And now I've got light. And so now I'm in a totally new area. And that's, for thing after thing now. And this is an ongoing process for me where I'm just constantly in the middle of experiments, and we'll see. And that helps me adjust the risk on any new activity, and also helps me learn incredibly quickly on anything I want to learn to be good at.
That's incredible. Edison, I did actually do 10,000 experiments in order to create light. And then funnier too is I find it interesting. So many people ask me for investment advice, and I'll always ask them, well, what's your timing or risk tolerance? And they haven't even considered it.
Yeah. Risk is the most important thing you have to consider in investing. And I guess that's what I didn't realize. It took me a long time to realize that.
Oh, me too. And my risk tolerance was super duper high, which I started learning now is much lower. All right. Last question.
But let me ask you a question, a quick question on this. Entrepreneurship. Everybody thinks entrepreneurs are risk takers, but I would say, and I'm curious your opinion on this, entrepreneurs spend most of the day reducing risk. Entrepreneurs are actually pretty good. Entrepreneurs are risk averse.
Yeah, for sure. They're resilient and risk averse. Those are the two things I've learned. There's no entrepreneur that can live without being resilient. They have to have a desire to must be what they can be, because the minute you have a quitter, someone that's not resilient, they'll never be an entrepreneur because there's too many chances to give up. No doubt.
But what people don't realize is that giving up actually is a far greater risk than reducing risk on a business. Look at 1 out of 3 workers were laid off in March. So having that stable job was the biggest risk you could possibly do. If you were an entrepreneur, you've already probably been reducing risk in preparation for every number of disasters that everyone thought you were crazy to think about. But an employee, you had no control. Sorry, we have to lay you off now. And that's a sad thing. But being an entrepreneur and understanding risk is kind of the most stable, safe thing you can do.
Yeah, no, and I have had a huge downturn plan, right? Just being from the experience of living through the decades of entrepreneurship and seeing 13 years of growth. I didn't know it was going to be a pandemic, but it gave me a huge leg up on everyone else because I was already ready for a downturn and had a plan of how I was going to lean into this and make huge opportunities, because I knew when huge change happens, that's where the margins of millionaires are made, and huge opportunities exist as long as you have that level head and enough resources to take advantage of it. So
absolutely. And we're living in a time that's very strange, but there's also, the economy is not, you can't even say it's up or down, it's tilted. And there's a lot of people who are unhappy right now, but there's trillions of dollars somewhere. And it all has to connect together. We've never been in a situation like this, but there are trillions of dollars out there. And so it's an interesting time to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, domestically and internationally, with all the dollars that are floating around, and who's going to capture that's going to be interesting. All right, last question, totally off topic, but I think it's going to give me a little bit of insight about you, because I'm just so impressed and interested. Number one, who's your favorite comedian?
Oh, I have a lot, so it's hard to say. But Dave Chappelle. There's up and coming guy Tim Dillon, another up and coming guy Chris Stefano, Bonnie McFarlane. I also own a comedy club, so I have hundreds of favorite comedians, and I'm a big fan all around of comedy. But those probably are my top 3 right now. But it changes every day.
I'm a huge fan. I actually believe that comedians are the most intelligent people that I've met, and been blessed to be around some of those people, and the incredible processing speed. It's almost like a quarterback. Comedians have quarterback processing speed, which is incredible. All right, last question. I need to hear it. What's your favorite joke?
Oh,
or one of your good ones.
Oh, from me?
Yeah.
Personally?
Yeah.
It would be out of context. I could describe the joke, but if I'm not on stage, give
me a good joke that you like. It could be a kid joke. You have a kid joke I'll tell you mine for my kids. My favorite.
All right, tell me yours.
Don't boo me on this if you can, but I love this joke. It's literally a horse walks into the bar and the bartender says, "Why the long face?" I think that's genius.
That's great. All right. In that context of like one-liners, there's a great comedian, Stephen Wright, he has very
Yeah.
deadpan delivery. So part of his genius is his deadpan dry, super dry delivery. So I won't try to imitate that, but he's got a great joke that I love. It's a small world, but I wouldn't want to paint it.
There you go.
That's the joke.
And you stole his haircut too. So
yeah, it's true.
why do they call him stands when everyone's sitting? All right.
Anyway, so
Anyway,
Mitch Hedberg has it's not broken. It's not a broken elevator. It's stairs. So
there you go. Well, we got to leave on this note. This has been an incredible playbook. What a just treat to meet you, James. I really look forward to doing more with you. Thank you so much for joining me. This is James Altucher with David Meltzer here on
thank you, David.
The Playbook.